Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, I'm Victoria. Together with Albert Ajmain Bedu and Fernando Gallardo Olmedo, we are presenting determinants of remittances in Africa. This is the outline of our study. We start from the background and problem statements through to conclusions and recommendations. So with the background and problem statement, remittances, which are private transfers from migrant country of origin to households, play an important role in the development of a country. Their transfers could be officially or unofficially channeled. Official channels consist of money transfer organizations, banking system transfers, and so on, whilst unofficial channels are the transferring of funds by cash or in kind. Remittances can have both positive and negative impact on the economy. The positive impact is, like what I said earlier, they affect the economy positively by developing it. And with the negative impact, some authors stated that a retardation in global growth affects commodity and oil prices, which also affects remittances. So the way remittances are used influences the effects it will have on poverty and income inequality. Therefore, issues pertaining to remittances have been raised in the past years due to its massive contribution to the economy of recipient countries. Knowing the determinants of remittances will encourage and help economies, governments, and even households to make better decisions. With the literature review, there's quite a lot of research on remittances, poverty, inequality, and economic growth independently. Some of the authors gave evidence of remittances, like the direct relationship between remittances and economic growth, whilst others focused on the impact of remittances on poverty, alleviation, and income inequality. But there is insufficient literature on the interplay of remittances, poverty, economic growth, and inequality. Hence, we add to literature by examining the link or relationship between the remittances, economic growth, and poverty in Africa. We updated the paper of Accra in 2016, who also did something on remittances, but he focused on only 41 sub-Saharan African countries. But in our case, we are focusing on 54. So we improve on this work. Data and methodology. The aim of the study is to examine determinants of international remittances in Africa. In order to do so, a 5-year non-overlapping panel of 54 African countries, as I said earlier, ranging from 1980 to 2019 was used. All our variables were gleaned from the World Development Indicators of the World Bank, excluding Polity 2, which was derived from the Polity 4 database. This study uses both static and dynamic linear and nonlinear panel models for analysis. So in our research, we had 4 models. That's the remittances model, the poverty model, the inequality model, and the growth model, where RMT is the represents remittances in country I at time T. The POV is the poverty effect. The measure of poverty. The G is the inequality effect or the inequality index. GDP is the economic growth. ZT is a set of control variables that is including household income, trade openness, government investments, inflation rates, financial development, dependency ratio, and growth in domestic institutions. We have the mu I, which is the time fixed effect, and the gamma is the country specific effects. Also, the epsilon is the idiosyncratic is the error term. Sorry. So these are the models we present in our study. So we have the results of our study, and we see that from the remittance model here, There is a negative significant relationship between poverty gap with remittances and GDP with remittances. This means that um, with the negative relationships, we can say that an increase in international remittances to Africa reduces the number of people living below the poverty line. And also, when we look at the control variables here, almost all of them have significant values except the financial development and quality. Looking at the poverty model, we see that both the relationship between remittances and poverty, as well as GDP and poverty, had negative significant value, except the Gini index, which is the inequality model, which has a positive significant value. And this positive relationship indicates that increased poverty rises income inequality of African countries. And when we come to the inequality model here, we see that both poverty gap and GDP have positive relationship with inequality model, same as the dependency ratio and financial development. And finally, when we look at the growth model, we can see that all the explanatory variables are statistically significant, except the trade openness here. This is not significant. And interestingly, we see mixed signs between the two relationships here. That's of the remittances and growth model and the financial development and growth model. Okay, so we also analyzed the threshold model. We did this because we wanted to capture the unsymmetrical relationships that existed. So with the threshold models, we have the static and dynamic. Also, there are two states involved. We have the low states, that's region 1, and then the high states, region 2. So this particular table represents the results of the static threshold model. In the remittance model, we see that poverty, inequality, and GDP has no relationship with the remittance model. However, the poverty model shows that remittances, income inequality, and GDP are significant in the low states, but only GDP is significant in the second region, that is here. And now, when we look at the inequality model, GDP values were all significant in both states, but had opposite or like different signs, that is here. And on the other hand, we see that only the high states of poverty was significant. That is this value here. And finally, when we look at the growth model, we see that both low and high states of poverty is significant, and the growth model and international remittances have significant values. So, in general, we can say that the results give significant changes in variables in each state, in line with the non-linearity assumption of economic variables. Now, we move to the dynamic threshold model. Similarly, the test of non-linearity confirms asymmetric relationships in all models. Just as the static estimator, the variables in the dynamic model exhibit differences in their low and high states. For instance, when we take the remittance model, poverty is negatively related to remittances in periods of lower poverty rates, but positively related by positive influence of high poverty rates. And here we are concluding. So this paper basically examines the determinants of international remittances to Africa. We used both static and dynamic panel models to assess the role of international remittances to economic development, poverty alleviation, and income inequality. We established both linear and non-linear relationships among variables and found remittances to reduce both poverty head counts and poverty gap. We also found mixed relationship between economic growth and remittances. And finally, we saw that international remittances to Africa have significant impact on household income, dependency ratio, trade openness, investment, and inflation. It is therefore suggested that international remittances are essential in economic development and poverty alleviation in Africa. Here ends my presentation, and I want to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Can you stop sharing your screen?
Sure, I'm coming. Sorry.
So next presentation is next speaker is Marta Pachoca and Anna. No, Carolina.
I think the next one is Dr. Marta and Dr.
Marta Pachoca y Carolina Sobac.
Yes, this is us. Okay. So can we start? So Carolina, she's responsible for launching the presentation. So not to waste our time because we have only 10 minutes. Hello everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marta Pachoca. Our today's presentation is the result of cooperation among two researchers from Warsaw School of Economics, Agnieszka and myself, and Carolina from University of Warsaw Center of Migration Research, and only the two of us will present today. So before we start, a few words about the background of the research and the context, and also our research profile. So Carolina, she's an expert in environmental migration, Agnieszka in monetary and fiscal policy at the EU level and member states, and myself mostly in refugee studies and asylum policy in the EU. So this small research initiative, research activity was launched by the three of us on the occasion of the Amenet project and Amenet conference, and it is mostly focused on environmentally induced migration in the so-called AME region. In our case, we understand by this region Africa, EU, and even Europe, but also the whole Mediterranean region. So we include in our research the Middle East. In our abstract submitted to the conference organizers, we've explained briefly how we understand and how we contextualize the environmental migration. So I will skip this part. In terms of the aims of the research activity, it's twofold. Carolina, please, next slide. So first, to provide an overview of the evidence and core issues topics regarding environmental migration in the Africa, Mediterranean, Europe region in the early 21st century through selected case studies. And we mean here mostly case studies from different countries of this region. And second, to examine and evaluate the proposed solutions and actions taken at two levels, the governments of given countries and selected international bodies. But for the purpose of this conference contribution, having only 10 minutes, we focus on some aspects of this research activity. So on environmental factors as direct or indirect push factors of migration on selected examples in the region in discussion, and people's ability to cope with environmental pressure where migration is described as one of the so-called coping strategies. In terms of the methodology of our research activity, we decided to implement a review of the literature, of sources and other available data on forced migration, environmental migration from countries located in the AME region. And this literature, these sources, these references include mostly academic journals because they are easily accessible, very often in open access, official documents of the governments of the international bodies, statistical data sets, and thematic reports, mostly published by such organizations as Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, UNHCR, or Arab Center for the Studies of Arid Zones and Dry Lands. The selection is based on materials in French and in English because these are two main languages for environmental migration area of studies, but also these are the languages Carolina and myself know well. And in terms of the time frame, we focused on the last 2 decades, so 2000, 2020. just to see the regional and global environmental changes and the policy responses that were applied. And now I would like to give the floor to Carolina.
So a few words of introduction about the environmental migrations. They can be divided into two main categories and 5 subcategories, namely natural disasters, infrastructure facilities, construction which directly cause displacement, and 3 other, the effects of climate change, and this here including climate vulnerability, environmental degradation, and the constraints that the environment places on human activities. Something what need to be underlined that it is commonly agreed that when the environment is not a direct cause of migration decision, then we face a mix of different political, social, demographic, economic, and environmental factors that shape migration, the decision. And today we are going to present on the chosen examples, how does the environment influence migration decision directly, or when it is part of such a complex relation. So let's start with this direct influence of environment on the migration decision. As we can see at the given map that just during the last 180 days, disasters have played a significant role in shaping displacement, also in the area covered by our analysis. One of such examples is Somali. I believe that all of us know that this is the case when we can find variety of factors stimulating migration. Since the early 1990s, it is affected by civil war and internal conflicts. Currently, it is even, in fact, a failed state. It has a high number of EDPs due to complex political situation, war, conflicts, and already mentioned disasters. Somalia had been affected by flash floods, followed by successive droughts that displaced many people from their areas of origin. Finally, on the 26th of December 2004, the east coast of Africa was hit by the tsunami, which resulted in the death of around 300 people and extensive destruction of shelters, houses, water resources, and fishing boats and equipment. The livelihood of many people residing in towns and small villages along Somalia's Indian Ocean coastline, particularly in the northern regions, were devastated. About 18,000 households were estimated to be directly affected and in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. 44,000 people were displaced due to this rapid onset hazard. Another example is Niger, where migration is a matter of vicious cycle. It started with a drought that led to poverty, which makes people cut the trees to sell the wood and survive. Sand creeps, intrudes, and silts, harming the farmers, herders, and fishermen, who in turn have to migrate and leave their families and the damaged environment behind. Lack of vegetation cover, which is the effect of deforestation, cause also soil degradation, which also negatively affects the livelihoods of the farmers and makes them to leave. So environmental conditions still worsen as the people left behind are not capable of restoring it sufficiently. So so here we can see that migration is the last sort, and also somehow this migration we can call environmentally induced economic migration in that place. The third example, El Fawa oasis in Tunisia, which actually is an example of the kind of adaptation to environmental limitations. This El Fawa oasis was established in 1960s, and since that time, it experienced both population growth and environmental changes. Bigger number of descendants caused the fragmentation of land and decrease in average income from the households. People started to cultivate new land. However, quite fast it came out that there are not sufficient water supplies for all cultivated areas. Then it caused deterioration of dates, crops, and growing need for new wells. Here we experience kind of vicious cycle because the need of new water resources and new wells caused the new fields caused the need for new water resources, and that caused the need for new financial resources. And one of them was immigration, both internal and international. This caused further exploitation of water resources, but still migration became one of adaptation strategies. And the fourth case is the situation when we talk about the relation between migration, conflict, and environment. As we can see on those two diagrams, the largest scale of resettlement in the analyzed area, so Africa and Middle East or Mediterranean region, is caused by conflict. However, we should mention in this place two issues. Firstly, the number of people displaced as a result of natural disasters is constantly growing. We can see it at both graphs. And the second thing, that still one of the unexplored areas concerns the relationship between the natural environment, conflicts, and migration. Last year, or in 2019, so a year ago more or less, Abdel with another co-authors published a paper where he presented the conceptual model of climate, conflict, and migration. If we follow the gray arrows, we will find the Syrian or as well South Sudanese cases. Syria was affected by drought already in 2006 and 2009. In that time, over 1 million Syrian lost crops, 800,000 lost source of income and food, crops of wheat and rye, as well as number of animals decreased. In 2011, the drought came back and 1.5 million of people, mostly farmers, were forced to move from rural areas to cities and camps in the suburbs of large Syrian cities. Not without significance was the impact of the lack of investment in the development of agriculture in Syria, which has contributed to the limitation and degradation of groundwater resources. The first riots were in the city of Dara, where turned a particular high number of young unemployed men displaced due to crop failures who protested against this neglect. Coming back to the model, where the green lines we show the process which can be observed in the Lake Chad, where drought caused by limitation of precipitation influenced the increase of role of military groups and the internal conflict of resources, and that caused migration and displacement. Martha?
So just to briefly summarize the research conducted so far. The first point, we know that environmental migration is a mixed type migration, so it's somewhere in between forced and voluntary migration in terms of the causes of migration. We are facing the lack of a clear definition of environmental migration and environmental migrant, and it applies to international law, for example, refugee law, but also the research results. So we have no definition in this regard. What is sure, the number of environmental migrants is increasing, and it will increasing on a year-to-year basis. We are facing lack of reliable, comprehensive estimates of the number of the people involved in the environmental migration. Also, there is no consensus on forecast in this domain. The majority of environmental migration take place within the same country, the country of their origin. So that is why the data that we have regarding international environmental migration are in fact the data about internal displacement. The natural environment, as Karolina explained, may influence the migration decision and migration movements in two ways, directly, indirectly. Directly, it's the case of sudden natural disasters like floods, like droughts, like fires or storms. but also it applies to the construction of large infrastructure facilities like dams or other development projects going on. This indirect influence refers to, first, gradient processes. Here we have climate change, climate variability, degradation of the natural environment, or second, the influence of demographic pressure. Simply, the environment can no longer sustain the local community, the local inhabitants. And the point is that the influence of environmental factors has been increasing, but unfortunately it is still undervalued, not only in the region of our research, so in the AME region, but also globally. And the push factors in the region of our research are obviously complex. So these are both conflicts and disasters, also economic factors. However, the environment degradation and its limitations may push people to move as the last sort or adaptation strategy, as we tried to illustrate on selected examples. And what follows is the basic list of references that we've used specifically for this presentation. If you have any other questions, we'll be more than happy to address these issues during the discussion or after the discussion by emails. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Carolina and Dr. Marta for this night's presentation. The next author is Juan Antonio Obregon, and he's presenting on the impact of remittances for development and new aid programs. So you can take the floor now. Hello?
No, you can see my presentation now. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present. I think I would like just to make a precision. I think what I'm going to present is not a research paper. I think I'm working for the cooperation agency from Spain. We are launching a new program with EU funding, and this and part of this program will be the market intelligence, a research program for which we would like to announce what are the main issues. As you know, I think there is a long international attention on the connection between migration and development. This started officially in 2005 with this report of the Global Commission for International Migration. And we have been doing a little bit of a mapping for our research of our program on what are the main documents and conclusions available. We are still ongoing on the research, and this is what I think and I found extremely useful what you presented today. Victoria already presented some of the ideas, but as you know, since the 80s, they discovered that it was realized that the importance of remittances was higher than the official aid, even higher than foreign direct investment in developing countries. This is for the whole world, but also in Africa, more specifically in Africa, you see that since 2006, 7, 8, the importance of remittances became even higher than all the official development aid and everything. So that's started to a lot of research on the elaboration on how to use these remittances or this funding in a way that promotes economic development in the countries, in developing countries. There are a lot of research. We are concluding our mapping exercise, but it's not academic research properly. It's mostly a kind of guidance that we have prepared, but this is some of the ideas that can be, or conclusion that can be derived. So remittances are the most stable source of income. We have some figures. The figures are still changing. We are still estimates, and we will be most welcoming or glad to share with you all the information that we have covered and all the information that is needed to do. All the research that still is needed on this field. Most of the information, or most of the resources are still used to cover the basic needs of the populations, but around 25%, maybe it's a little bit overstated, but I think a small part of that is used also for investment. And we found, and this is a major conclusion overall, that the remittances might be a major driver for development in these countries. Big problem we have seen is that financial services are still not adapted to those needs. So I don't need to go in details about what are the main milestones of this global thinking of that, but at the global level, after this UN conference in 2006, you created several groups that are still working on these issues, and we have a new initiative from the UN on the Global Compact for Migration, where we are trying to foster and promote the coherence between development aid or development assistance and the financial policies, so that we can align and harness all this potential of remittances for development. Of course, there are many interventions and knowledge platforms that might be interesting for you. I think we, with this program, we're going to be working with IFAD, who has been leading since 2006 with this global forum on remittances, investment and development. More recently, in 2020, they launched this remittances community task force, who is mostly focused on the consequences of COVID and trying to address some of these consequences. That, of course, the African Development Bank and together with them, the African Institute for Remittances, they launched it in 2009 and a specific program, and they have a very interesting platform, Making Finance Work for Africa, where they have a solid and consistent database on remittances. And of course, we cannot ignore the World Bank group, that they have, in fact, two groups, one specific working group of development aid agencies on remittances, and they have this general global knowledge partnership on migration and development. Of course, this is just to name a few of them. There are a few others, but this is the most general and global ones that can be easily accessible and near public for that. So there is a lot of research that is being mapped in these three platforms. And then there is something more specific that we are trying to do. So what we are trying to do, the program we just launched is Inclusify, is the second one, but it's building on another European Union funded program, PRIME, Platform for Remittances Investment, that is specifically addressed to reduce the transfer cost of remittances from Europe to Africa and within Africa. They are working in 7 countries where they have selected and where they are going to do all the diagnosis and the analysis, and they will have some intervention on the regulatory aspect of that. My intervention today is mostly to call the attention of your attention on the research that is going to be needed is mostly applied research, it's not theoretical. We are going to be exploring a little bit the close linkages between this remittances market and the financial sectors in Africa. We will be focusing also on a few countries, mostly West and East Africa, and most likely will be around the same countries that PRIME has already intervened. And we are going for the first component, we would like to issue a few calls for research on specifically these connections between the remittances and the local financial institution. What are the main barriers for access to these financial services? And we are going to launch a few pilot initiatives with supporting assistance both for diaspora organizations, local enterprise and financial institutions to see if we can remove some of these barriers and have a more fruitful. So I will be, if you have any questions or anything, I will be most glad to attend and receive your question by email. I'm sharing with you this my email, and the presentation will be available for the organization. And that's all. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Juan Antonio Obregon. And that's an interesting work. Now we have the next presentation. I think is in French from Larech Wafai, and he's presenting on les changements climatiques et les corrélations avec le mouvement.
Oui, est-ce que vous pouvez m'entendre? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. But
Okay.
it's noisy.
So hello everyone, I am Wafa Lahrash, PhD student in University of Oujda, Morocco. Please wait for a moment for sharing my script.
Hello.
Oui, give me a few minutes for resolving problems, please. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Victoria, we can pass to the next one.
Okay, so we can move to the next one from Youssef Amenet, who is presenting illegal immigration in the Mediterranean Sea and issues of security in Europe. So we can invite him. Youssef. Is Youssef here? Or maybe I'm not mentioning the name well.
Youssef?
I don't think he's here. No, he's
connected.
Yeah, he's connected, but I don't think he can hear us. Well, should I move to the next one?
Yes, pass to the next one.
Okay, and we have Olivia, who is presenting on vulnerabilities. I don't know if Olivia too is around.
I'm around.
Okay, then
I'm around. Let me share my screen. Thank you. Open my screen. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wheresoever you are as a participant this afternoon. My name is Olivia, and I'll be discussing the vulnerabilities, social, cultural, health poverty, and inequality issues this afternoon. For the purpose of the topic and the discussion, I wouldn't be going too technical or too academic, and I'll tell you why. My introduction, I looked at what inequality is, and I said equality is equality of being unequal. It suggests a difference in social status, wealth, or opportunity between people or groups. Inequality is a type of unfairness where others are entitled to some advantages, services that others are not entitled to. Inequality exists between individuals. It could be between families, communities, countries, and other institutions that is set up by people. Types of inequalities. I listed different kinds of equality that could exist. We've got income inequality, we've got education, we've got gender, economics, social inequality, and inequality in the use of public services, such as health inequality. Consequences of inequalities: income disparity, job stratification, less stable economy, crime, poverty, high mortality rates, and poor education, low management of medical facilities and provision. I say that inequality leads to vulnerability, such as poverty, ill health, and mental health. Health inequalities. If at all anything the pandemic has done, the pandemic has actually exposed how fragile the medical services are in Africa. I said also that different sectors in the society, whether in Africa or in the world, are affected by health inequalities. For example, age, their class, whether they are poor or they are rich. But when it comes to Africa, when it comes to health inequalities, it's all about class. For example, he found that poverty and undernutrition increase the vulnerability of people to COVID-19 by weakening their immune system. An estimated 50 million children lost access to free meals with the closing of schools, and the loss of job-related income has exacerbated food insecurity for large proportions of the region's population. Now, I want to give us an overview of what happened in Africa during the first, I don't want to say first pandemic or second pandemic. It's an ongoing one, but during the first wave of the pandemic. There were predictions, let me look to what concerns that Africa, due to the fragile medical facilities and hospitals and professionals that are available, that there could be an increase in the number of deaths because many states in Africa didn't have the facilities to look after people properly. But in the first wave, we find out that even though there were a few casualties, it's not the same as the number of deaths that we had in places like Canada, the US, and the UK. Even though in Africa, on the 14th of February, one case of COVID-19, started like a ripple, then went to Nigeria, went to South Africa, and went all over the place. Now, in the second wave of the pandemic, the impact of the COVID-19 infection was clearly felt. I did say in the first wave, we had, very few deaths. Of course, there's no death. There's no one single person is important to their families and communities. But we are comparing that to Western countries. That was during the first wave. But during the second wave of the pandemic, as of Friday, 19th of February, there were over 100,000 deaths, that have been recorded by the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is a sad development. Underlying health conditions are a significant driver of COVID-19 in sub-Saharan Africa. For example, 18.3% of COVID-19 deaths in the region were among people that had diabetes. The region experienced a 600% increase in diabetic cases from 4 million to 25 million between 1980 and 2014. And around 60% of people were living with diabetes and they were not diagnosed. And because a lot of hospitals, during the first wave, closed because of the COVID, people, that had COVID, that had diabetes were not getting the right medication that they should get because a lot of people could not go out due to the lockdown. Some hospitals were shut in and they didn't have enough health facilities. I want to take the case of Nigeria, the underlying factors, the inequality that is there. In a lot of rural areas, villages, there were problems of water. And remember that the WHO, World Health Organization, did say that 3 things while waiting for the vaccination or medicine to deal with the COVID to limit the spread as one, wearing a face mask, washing the hands, and keeping 2 meters. Now, in many countries in Africa, especially the village areas, and that's where the inequality is, there are people that don't have proper ventilation. Not only do they not have proper ventilation, you have families, large families, people, living in polygamous settings. They have almost about 15 people living in about 3-bed house or even 2-bed house. All together. How could those people keep 2 meters, away from other during this COVID, which is a problem? Also, we also find out that water scarcity is another inequality issue in Africa, especially around the rural areas. There are people that don't even have, countries that don't have access to running tap water. So as a result, some of the women and the ladies would have to travel miles and miles to get water. Now, if they have to travel miles and miles to get water, how could these people be said to hand wash when they don't even have proper drinking water? What's the problem? Poverty is rooted in the deprivation of people's access to necessities such as healthcare and sanitation. Therefore, the impact of poverty in countries where existing health inequalities existed exacerbate the vulnerability of the poor to COVID-19 pandemic. Africans account for 2/3 of more than 643 million people across the world living in extreme poverty, according to the Brookings Institute report. And the worst affected countries where poverty is concerned, we're talking about inequality in health, are in Nigeria, where you've got 87 million people living in poverty, Democratic Republic of Congo, 60 million, Kenya, 14.7 million, Uganda, 14.2, Ethiopia, 23.9. Impact of health disparities. In African countries, it is due to the severe disparities arising from social economic factors. COVID-19 can have a devastating impact on poor people, especially the elders. Not only so, there have been issues of conflict, there have been issues of war. So many people have been displaced from the original countries. So they've had to, move to neighboring countries or otherwise where they are putting, lots together like sardines, should just live together with men, with women. Such people cannot necessarily, keep a social distance because there's no space. And so this is, a serious humanitarian challenge in Africa. In conclusion, I look at some things. Well, I say, how do we deal with this? Obviously, I remember, I want to take the case of Nigeria, for example, during the first wave. When the lockdown was moving from the first month to the second month, people were crying out that if they don't go out, they can't they can't feed their family, because some people rely on others to feed. Those that, for example, people that look after cars, like mechanics, people that sell, basic traders, they have to get money. They don't rely on salary. And if people don't come out, they couldn't feed, and there was poverty. Of course, there were palliatives that were given around, but there were issues with those palliatives because it didn't get across to a lot of people. Now, these are the inequalities. Meanwhile, there are other people that have access to healthcare. But even in the healthcare, there were problems with ventilation. So, not ventilation, but ventilators, There are problems with oxygen. We're talking about medical facilities to the extent that even the rich, could, not because they couldn't afford it, there was scarcity of oxygen. In places like Nigeria, for example, oxygen existed, but there was scarcity. There was scarcity of ventilators also. So these issues, further widened up the gap, the inequality. Now, also, we found out that there were, when there were news that the vaccination, program will be released, from state to state, from nation to nation. Well, there were issues also about Africa. And what were these issues? Storage facilities. There are some countries that, they don't have the electricity. They don't enjoy the kind of electricity people in Spain do enjoy. I can say that for Nigeria, for example, that, they don't enjoy, the kind of, not only electricity, also, we mentioned again, water. So they don't have that facility. They don't have that, storage systems where you could store, for example, the Pfizer, as though were concerns also that were raised by WHO. As we're talking now, some countries have started, disbursing the COVID-19 vaccinations, while some are going to start at the end of February. But there's still a long way to go. There's still a long way to go because some people, where vaccinations are concerned, there are some religious beliefs about vaccination. There are misconceptions about vaccinations, and some are not encouraged to take it. So, the government already started, raising that awareness, and through the, members of the community who can actually go out, to encourage others, to take the vaccine, to do proper sanitation, to, avoid the spread of COVID-19. Also, finally, using proper cash transfers to tackle the structural determinants of health would help. And then the implementation of cash transfers can also mitigate the structural determinants of health, such as income poverty, that limit the capacity of marginalized populations to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And that, because when people have the means to meet their basic needs for food and shelter, they will be encouraged to engage in healthy behaviors, understanding that COVID-19 is not a hearse, it is real. Just like Ebola was real, it was real, just like AIDS are real, so that they could, engage in practice, practical behavior, such as, keeping their distance, wearing the face mask, and sanitizing where there is water. And that concludes my presentation at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivia. I don't know if Laurette or
Oui. Yes, yes, I'm here.
okay, you can present now.
Do you see the script?
Not yet. I don't know if you are still facing problems, maybe Yusuf can also
I
present.
don't know. I try, but I don't know.
Is Yusuf around? Are you ready?
وسيلة أنا حاضر وسيلة. Okay, you listen me, please. You listen. You listen
What?
me.
What?
You listen me.
Yes.
You
Yes.
are you? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you. My contribution is about illegal immigration in the Mediterranean Sea and the issue of security in Europe. At first, historically, the Mediterranean basin has been central towards which concentrated.
Sorry, excuse me. Please, we can't see your screen.
Okay, concentrated. I have faced the problem in my camera. It's impossible to see me. I don't know why.
Not you, but you need to share your screen. I mean,
but the problem, I have a problem in my camera. You hear me or not? You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but you need to share your screen so that we can all see what you are presenting.
Sorry for interrupting, but I think that Amitosh is not a co-host, so he cannot share simply. Because as far as I see, there's no co-host.
I have problem in my camera.
But dear, it's not about your camera, it's about the possibility to share your presentation, so about the option of hosting.
I have already co-hosted him.
Yeah. So maybe now. Try now.
I carry on. So the Mediterranean basin has been a central here with European colonialism, particularly British.
Sorry, please. I think you are now a co-host, so you can share your screen now.
I don't know how to use it. Problem.
No.
Okay.
And when you look at on your screen, there's a place share screen, and you can share your presentation. Otherwise, we don't know what you're talking about. Please.
I am speaking. My contribution is about illegal immigration in the Mediterranean Sea and the issue of security in Europe. I send for organizers my abstract. Okay. I don't know how to use it. I don't master a computer. My problem. Okay.
You're not using a computer. Please, are you using a computer or a phone?
I can't. The problem. I don't know. I don't know how to use it.
Joseph?
Yes.
This is Esther. I have your presentation. Do you want me to share your presentation? Joseph?
How? I don't know how to use it. I don't know how.
Okay. Don't worry. I'm going to do it for you.
Yes.
Please, you can do it for me also.
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay. If I don't resolve the problem, you can do it, please, merci.
Yeah, I can.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just 1 minute.
Okay.
This is Joseph.
Okay,
Presentation.
okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, okay. I can
Okay.
carry on. I can carry on. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. So with European colonialism, particularly British and French empire, thousands of European immigrants and travelers were carried in the south of Mediterranean. So a kind of migration appeared by encouraging people from Europe to move to new colonies in the south. Moreover, after the First and Second World Wars, the European countries, particularly France and United Kingdom, opened their frontiers through legal immigration to foreign labor or people of their colonies. The first migration here phase between 1945 till 1970, known as the glorious years. Therefore, both the authorities of the various European countries and private companies recruited migrant workers from South countries of Mediterranean who contributed to development and economic growth of Europe. Then, the third phase, that situation of need of workers from the South continued till the 1970s, where the second phase of migration policy initiated by European countries, which decided to close their frontiers to the immigration due to the economic crisis of 1973. The third phase of immigration started at the end of 1980s with international development like civil wars and the collapse of Soviet Union, and new European countries have become destination for illegal immigration such as Spain, Portugal, and Greece. Meanwhile, the immigrants to Europe have concerned not only the people of ancient colonies, but also people from Africa and Asia. Moreover, with economic and social crisis in Europe in 1980s and 1990s, many European countries took many restrictions to legal immigration. That act opened the way to illegal immigration, which has been encouraged by the development of modern means of communication. The second part is the causes of illegal immigration. There are in general two parts of causes. The first one, push factors, which includes factor pushing people to immigrate, like economic, political, social, and security factors, whereas second pull factors, which reflect a need of immigrants due to a slow demographic growth, the aging population, and providing enough qualified manpower. Now, the third part is about migration routes in the Mediterranean Sea. The number of illegal immigrants who have crossed the Mediterranean Sea is increasing more and more during the last 2 decades due to the Schengen Accord about free circulation of European people within the Union states, with the pressure which are created on southern European countries. The first, if you like, there are many routes. The first one is in East European Sea. You can, the other can see it through the map. The second, in the West Mediterranean Sea, it means from Portugal and particularly Spain. And the third one here in the map from Italy in the center of Europe. Now the third, if you like, there are many data about in the table about arrival, for example, evolution of the situation in the Mediterranean Sea, particularly in years 2015 and 2015 and 2016. Where many immigrants arrived in Europe due to civil wars in Syria, and also we have also evolution of illegal immigration in Mediterranean Sea in 2016-17 here, particularly in Italy, where illegal immigrants arrived more and more in Italy, in the center of Europe, due to the wars in Libya and Syria, and also in Greece, and in Spain it is less. So the main route was in center and east of Europe. Then now the last part is about what about illegal immigration and security in Europe. Illegal immigration constitutes a great challenge and one of the new security threats to the security of European countries and political stability for the governments and societies of the European Union, which focused before and which have focused till now their efforts to stopping this phenomenon. Illegal immigrants is considered as problem for Europe, like the increase of illegal drugs and street crimes, as it happened, for example, in Cologne during the new year of 2015. Moreover, extreme rights discourse in Europe considers illegal immigrants as an economic giant, tends to link illegal immigrants with financial giant on the European economy and services like schools and hospitals. European countries considers illegal immigration as a new challenge which affects public order by the increase of crimes, disturbing Christian cultural identity, and constitutes a threat to European cultural and religious identity, disrupting the social cohesion of European societies, increasing employment and deteriorating purchasing power. The security threat engendered by illegal migration was confirmed by terrorist attack which occurred in the Stadium of France in November 2015. Two of these three suicide bombers involved in this cooperation were checked in Greece in October before joining France. Illegal immigration favors the existence of clandestine networks specialized in human trafficking, which is considered as challenge and violation of European security. Illegal immigration also encourage the rise of European right-wing political parties. I hope this is the end. I hope that you appreciate my contribution, and thank you. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you.
And now, Larech. Hello, Larech.
Yes, I'm here. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a technical problem, and I am so sorry.
Don't worry. I think
Thank you very much.
Can share your.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm looking for it. Okay, I think I have it.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know what happened. Okay, it's good. Thank you very much. Yes. So my presentation will be in French. I am Wafa Al-Ahraj, PhD student from Oujda, Morocco. Donc, le sujet. The presentation, please.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Donc, le sujet de ma présentation traite les changements climatiques au Maroc. Voilà, ce sujet de migration environnementale et mondialisée sous une gouvernance mondiale, surtout que ces migrants reflètent le visage humain et qui risquent d'avoir de graves atteintes à leur vie et leur intégrité physique. Je me suis intéressée en particulier au cas du Maroc dès les années 1900 60 parce que d'une part, les changements climatiques, surtout le stress hydrique, frappent de plus en plus la population de manière sévère et d'autre part, il existe peu de travaux consacrés à l'estimation du nombre de migrants climatiques. Can you change the script, please? Thank you. Et d'autre part, et jusqu'à présent, il y avait un manque d'intérêt des pouvoirs publics pour ce genre de déplacement qui est non structuré et qui contribue aux inégalités de répartition spatiale et régionale. Can you change, please? And sorry for this.
Don't worry.
De ce fait, face à cette situation d'interaction réciproque des déplacements sur l'environnement et vice-versa, on se demande sur les mesures prises pour l'intégration des dimensions migratoires et climatiques dans la politique de développement national. Surtout que la migration liée au climat est une question politique plus qu'environnementale. Can you change, please? Donc, la méthodologie, je me suis basée sur une analyse déductive, inductive et avec une réflexion prospective. Donc, pour commencer, on peut relever qu'il n'existe pas de définition juridique reconnue pour ces migrants et par conséquent, ils ne rentrent dans aucune des catégories particulières prévues par le cadre international juridique existant. Et donc, ils sont exclus de protection internationale qui leur est spécifique. En plus, le changement climatique est une modification durable de la composition de l'atmosphère et qui affecte le Maroc de façon vulnérable. Can you change, please? Donc, le Maroc est fragile climatiquement. On constate une augmentation de température, une élévation du niveau des mers, surexploitation des ressources naturelles et bien sûr une pénurie d'eau. Donc, selon une étude, 80% de ressources en eau seront disparues d'ici 2025. Can you change, please? De ce fait, on constate que la demande en ressources hydriques est supérieure au volume de la surface et il est inégalement réparti. Donc, il y a des sécheresses répétées, des inondations de plus en plus fréquentes, des pertes de vie humaines, et cela se répercute notamment sur les conséquences socio-économiques de la population. On constate donc que le facteur environnement serait à l'origine des autres facteurs qui prennent plus tard la forme des problèmes socio-économiques comme la baisse de la production agriculture, l'augmentation du prix des denrées alimentaires, les conflits autour de l'eau, l'isolement de la population rurale. Can you change, please? Ces impacts sur les déplacements renferment des formes de migration temporelle, spatiale et bien sûr temporelle. Donc, ils ne se font plus dans une structure ou bien dans une distance qui est limitée. On constate une migration internationale. J'ai pris comme exemple les subsahariens qui migrent au Maroc pour la principale cause de la dégradation environnementale dans leur pays d'origine. Concernant la migration interne, l'illustration type de cette migration liée au climat est la société pastorale. J'ai pris comme exemple les nomades de Blimsky qui ont carrément abandonné ce mode de migration, ce mode de vie pour immigrer soit en Italie, soit à l'intérieur à la ville de Stas. Et un autre exemple, celui de l'oriental, qui ont préféré faire face à cette migration et aux contraintes climatiques. Donc, un autre exemple est celui de la région de la Azélal. L'ensemble des migrants à l'étranger sont des ruraux et un lien a été établi entre les périodes de sécheresse répétées et les périodes de mobilité. Can you change, please? Donc, pour la migration interne environnementale, elle prend la forme de l'exode rural qui s'intensifie, mais d'autres formes interurbaines, interrurales, et bien sûr vers les zones côtières, ce qu'on appelle maintenant littoralisation des migrations. Et cela se répercute sur la fragmentation de la population et sur la répartition inégale des régions, de la population dans les régions marocaines. On va compter de ces régions via Casablanca-Stade avec plus de 26% de la population migrante. Can you change, please? Donc, des mesures ont été prises. Le Maroc a adhéré sur le plan international et régional à plusieurs traités et conventions, que ce soit sur le plan climatique ou bien dans la stratégie migratoire. Cette déclinaison a été au niveau national. Can you change, please? A été conjuguée par des modifications au niveau juridique, institutionnel et bien sûr au développement durable, la stratégie du développement durable. Can you change, please? Bien sûr, les programmes de protection et surtout la stratégie d'atténuation et d'adaptation dans le cadre de ces migrations de l'environnement. Can you change, please? Voici une illustration du graphique qui illustre la stratégie d'adaptation à l'élévation du niveau de la mer. On voit d'abord par étapes l'abandon des zones vulnérables, puis l'occupation de ces zones importantes de modification et bien sûr la protection de ces zones en utilisant des structures de défense appropriées. Can you change, please? On constate donc une insuffisance des pouvoirs publics dans le cadre de la migration environnementale qui est devenu un phénomène d'ampleur, d'une grande ampleur et qui est une réalité évidente. D'ici 2030, qui est le futur proche, on va exposer en cas de non-réaction à un exode de 5,5 millions de ruraux, à une pénurie d'eau. Can you change, please? Et pour cela, il faut une coopération régionale basée sur une vision de développement réaliste et plus crédible. Donc, surtout que les études, can you, the second. L'ampleur des migrations, surtout à progression lente, et s'accroît avec les changements climatiques, bien sûr, et les migrants qui ont une décision soit collective, soit individuelle, mais sûrement forcée par la dégradation du climat. Ce nombre de migrants progresse, surtout, il dépend des politiques migratoires envisagées pour le futur. Voilà, je vous remercie et I am so sorry for this problem.
Don't worry, it's okay. Thank you very much for your...
Thank you for it.